Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder. Yes, this is in fact a tank that I'm playing. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Yes, I know it has been a while. I'm sorry about this, but it just was... I just was playing the stuff that interested me personally, and tanks were just second line. The Type 75 SPH self-propelled howitzer, which I'm playing right now, is from the Japanese tech tree at battle rating 7.0. It looks a little bit like a Dicke Max in overall shape, especially the front, the gun, etc. and the proportions, but it has much more in common with the Lorraine 155 at battle rating 4.3, although it shares quite a few similarities. There are a lot of features that justify a much higher battle rating, but then in other news I think that 7.0 for the Type 75 due to the limitations is quite rough, but it's far from useless. It's more of a derp vehicle, fun mobile, and not really than a serious player, although personal tastes and preferences obviously vary. So let's go into the comparison to put this thing into perspective. The Lorraine 155 has no turret, whereas the Type 75 has a turret, but the turret rotation speed is rather low. Then the Lorraine 155 with an expert ace crew and fully upgraded has 20 seconds reload. So it depends on the crew and it's quite long. Whereas the Type 75 has a 10-second autoloader, which is awesome, because you also have the full 10-second reload if you're down to only 2 crew members, like in this example here, which was also a very nice battle scene, which I just had to include here. Then, the next thing is that the Lorraine 155 is only limited to a smoke shell and granted a powerful HE shell. However, there is no armor piercing, and then the backup 15mm on top of it is also not all that great. It overheats quite often or quite quickly. The penetration and the damage etc. is underwhelming. It's not really reliable even versus aircraft. Whereas the Type 75 has 2 more ammunition types. But the 50 cal on top of it is just much more reliable. If you drive American tanks in particular, you know how useful a 50 cal is. It doesn't overheat, it has good trajectory, it has good damage and good pen for its caliber. But back to the ammunition. So let's go through the ammunition for the Type 75 SPH in order, and the stock shell is the M107, which is exactly the same with the exact same stats that you will find on the Lorraine 155, and that is in fact the one shell that I am using all the time. It travels at a muzzle velocity of 580 meters per second and contains over 9 kilograms of TNT equivalent, resulting in 61 millimeters of penetration and quite some splash damage, including tracking, setting stuff on fire, and also splashing through lesser armor in a 90-degree angle even though. So it's a good HE shell. And it is effective if you get the gun on target. More on this in just a moment. Then we have as a tier 1 upgrade the M110 smoke shell. Again, if you like it or not, it's much more useful on the Lorraine due to the reload mechanism, and also we have 28 shells of ammunition, so you can afford to take a few of them with you. Then we come to the 4th shell. I will come to the 3rd shell in just a moment, which is a tier 3 upgrade, and that is the Type 75 high explosive shell. It travels at a higher muzzle velocity of 720 meters per second, but contains quote-unquote only 6.8 kilograms of TNT equivalent, resulting in an overall penetration value at any angle, at any distance of 54 millimeters. That's not bad, but certain tanks require just a bit more pen to get down, and so the M107 stock HE shell it mostly is. You can decide for yourself if you prefer one or the other, but then the tier 2 upgrade, which is in fact the 3rd shell type, is the M107 PF, and that is nothing but the M107 stock HE shell with a variable time fuse. So with a variable time fuse, and that results in quite a lot of possibilities in theory. In practice, it doesn't really work. It's highly unreliable, and I thought that this would be probably the best SPA that there is. But in fact, it doesn't really work like this. It doesn't work versus aircraft. I've tested this with Lorraine, which is another content creator. There you can see the results for the first battle. And it was quite frustrating because it works just fine in naval forces, with ships. I have a lot of experience with the proximity fuse shells from the secondaries, from the main guns. They just swat an enemy aircraft out of the sky like there is no tomorrow. But the slow traverse of the turret and also the slow elevation speed are kind of hindering the effective of getting the gun on plane as a target in the first place, and then you have to lead more or less correctly. But it would be cool, it would be really cool if this would be possible. But again, Gaijin has kind of Gaijin itself, and so yeah, we are not really there. Nice driving model, by the way, Gaijin. Gaijin mode continues. Okay, let's go back to this proximity fuse shell. It is also possible that you just lob the shell over a ridgeline, and then you just splash a target that is behind it by the fuse going off above the enemy tank, which was, I think, mentioned in the dev blog. But I tested this against the potato trucks, so tanks with no armor, etc. The shells either were triggered by the ground in front of the vehicle or just didn't ignite at all, because the margin of error is very small, and that is kind of a shame. The next thing is you can actually set this to a time fuse up to 1100 meters, or where the non-laser rangefinder ends, so that you have practically a time fuse. You have to switch the ammunition to kind of undo this time fuse to go back to the variable time fuse, but that is not really worth it. In my opinion, I only use the majority of stock HE shell and then maybe a few smoke shells, and that's actually everything that you need to know about this tank. The next thing is that the Lorraine 155 is open topped, so it's vulnerable to aircraft. You lose quite a lot of crew to also machine guns from other tanks if they fire at you, and the first guy that dies is the machine gun gunner, so after the first crew death you don't have the secondary option as well. Quite in contrast here a little bit to the Type 75, where you have overall 6 crew, of which 5 are in the turret. How this works out with the autoloader, I have no idea, but it seems to work. And the loader, the mid-loader, kind of gets decapitated according to the X-ray model every time the gun goes off. But who am I to talk about this, right? So you can lose quite a few crew members, and you still have 2 available. In conjunction with the autoloader, you're practically still at max performance. The horsepower to ton ratio, so the mobility, is another topic. It's just under 20, so 19 point something, and you can go in a straight line relatively quickly up to the top speed of 47 kilometers per hour, where it's limited. In reverse, it's something like 14-15 kilometers per hour. The vehicle also has some neutral steering, but it's really sluggish, so it takes a while up until the point that it accelerates, and it really doesn't like mud. I think the tracks are too narrow, so that is painful as well, but it's not really bad. It's just not as good as you would expect from the horsepower to ton ratio. And the next thing is the gun depression is only 5 degrees, so while it looks like a Sture Emil, it doesn't really have the or rather a Dicker Max, I'm sorry, it looks more like a Dicker Max from the proportions, with the exception of not being open topped, and it has only 5 degrees of gun depression rather than the 15 from the German tank destroyer. Gun elevation is 65 degrees, and again, that would be great for indirect fire, for lobbing shells behind buildings, but also for sniping down planes. But sadly, again, this doesn't work. The maps are not arranged in the way where this would work, etc, etc. So again, the tank could be much more diverse. Nice situational awareness there, mate. So But again, it's kind of, it dumbs down to shotgunning people. Yeah, I know, long way to say it, but I just wanted to run down some statistics. So again, at 7.0 we have no laser rangefinder, we have no artillery strike. I mean, you are an RT, but again, map design. Then you cannot scout like a light tank, as well as you cannot help your teammates to be repaired, with the exception of the auto squad guy. Then the slow turret rotation speed at 7.0, where quite a few tanks are very fast, very nimble, just out-traverse you, or have in fact a stabilizer. That's also painful for frontline duties. I know you should snipe from the back, but sometimes you're one of the few players left on your team, and then you have to go into those positions. Then the next thing, it doesn't have a stabilizer. The high explosive variable time fuse just doesn't work, which is quite a shame. It does not only not work versus aircraft, but also is very inconsistent and very unreliable versus tanks. So I know if you play probably hundreds of games, you get a feel for when the shell goes off, at which obstacle it goes off, at bushes, trees, anything wooden, buildings, fences, everything sets the VT fuse off. And if the enemy tank is nearby, then that is kind of a different step from an armor piercing shell or APFSDS to heat FS and hash and high explosive, which don't go through bushes. But even if there is a bush near, then the variable time fuse, aka the proximity fuse, just goes off in mid-air and at best only alerts the enemy. So that is not so great. Other than this, if you manage to get a kill, it is satisfying, I have to say it. And again, it's a tech 3 vehicle, so you don't have to play it. Although I wanted to have something as the end of the line tank, because after this you over jump a tier and 2.3 battle ratings to go to the Type 16, which is completely different. So this tank destroyer line for the Japanese is a bit weird, but hey, that's just how it is. And yeah, it's a derp tank. I see this getting used in the future, always, like certain other tanks, KV2, ISU 152, Brummbär, Sturmpanzer 2, just to name some of the derp tanks. But again, I think that the Lorraine 155 actually does overall a much more satisfying job. That was a poor shot, that was only my fault. But hey, he just spawned, so it's alright. Yeah, but the funny thing is, if you would go lower with battle rating, it would actually get a bit more difficult for this tank, because at lower battle ratings, tanks have more armor all around. For example, the upper belt armor, if you will, of the Tiger tank is 80mm thick, so you have to aim between the tracks, where then behind that the armor plating is 60mm, and then I'm not quite sure how reliable it is then. The next thing is, so many more tanks have then better armor, and if you get up tiered, this is a tank that is a, how did that kill him? How did that kill him? I don't know. Well, it's Gretchen. So I think that if you get up tiered, it's not all that bad, because you have to deal with all the sad problems, getting gun on target, etc. in the first place, and then the targets very often have less armor, the fast, quick, nimble tanks, so they are easier, more reliable to destroy with the high explosive shell. So I was just trying to park here and to just observe here the region, and didn't see the T-44, which kind of ambushed me, and I would be dead here if not for the great help of a teammate. I tried to get the rock between me and him, and just when I thought that I'd be dead, a Type 61 kind of saved me. So there you can see the reverse speed, 14 kilometers per hour. It's not the worst, it's not really fast either, it's okay, and we now have a damaged gun breech, which gets surprisingly hit often and knocked out, despite it being rather small, so there is no real big auto-loading mechanism in the X-ray visible, like for example on some of the French tanks that have autoloaders, that is. And I still, after this over 30-second reload time, repair time, I'm fully operational in that sense. Yes, I like the machine gun, but hey, what are you gonna do? So I think that this tank is a dub tank. I had a little bit of fun playing it, but it was also quite frustrating in some ways, finding out that the variable time fuse shell doesn't work. I spent quite a bit of time testing it again with Lorraine, and before that in the test drive. I tried quite a bit, and I hope that Gaijin implements that in the future. Up until that, we have to do. We have to deal with the enemies like this. Don't get me wrong, you can hit tanks on the top with the proximity fuse shell, but the conditions are quite strict on that respect, and they are so unreliable that you have to specifically play for getting kills that way. That's the problem why I don't use it, because I'm old-fashioned. I get into a lot of situations where I see an enemy and I just want to blow him up because he's not aware of this, like this guy. And here I actually went through the effort of range finding. As you can see, it's not a laser range finder, and by the time I figure it out, I want to lob the shell in, and just when the shell is in the air, yeah, he detonates by a suicide bomb from the F6F. Well, nevertheless, is this tank worth it, going for it? I think it could be worse. I think it is kind of a bit of a relief. It's a derp tank. It is up to you if you like it or not. It has many good ingredients. It has decent mobility. It has overall a turret, which is quite a bit of a relief after the Lorraine 155, but it heavily pays by 7.0 instead of 4.3. So I don't really get the battle rating difference there. But again, it's a tank that is more or less independent from the battle rating. So here we got nearly 44,000 silver lines, and nearly a third to it, or over a third, went to the Heavy Metal Hero and the Survivor Award combined in income together with the other awards. And yeah, that was nice. I was somewhere in the middle of the team. I was 5th in place, but still it was okay since I didn't cap and I didn't get any assists except one. So that's it for me today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know in the comment section if you would like to see some more tank action on my channel. And as usual, we will see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.